Cheers and welcome to Irondale Brewing. There's a bunch of stuff in the brewing world that is divisive, from what kind of canner is better to tilt versus pill to any number of nuances in the brewing process and on and on and on. But right up at the top of the list is pumpkin beers. Some people love them, some people hate them. I hate them, generally speaking, but in the last couple of years, I've had some that I think are pretty good. I had one last year. I should have looked up the brewery first. I'll put a link to the video that used squash that I thought was pretty interesting. And also Matt from Rec Brewery sent me one last year that was a pumpkin Märzen that was excellent. And I was talking to him about pumpkin beers in general, and he said, hey, why don't you try and make one that you think is good? So I took that, he didn't put it that way, but I took that challenge seriously and started thinking about what would a pumpkin beer that I would like taste like. And number one, it can't have any pumpkin pie spice. Don't get me wrong, I love pumpkin pie. I do eat it with a ratio of Cool Whip to pie at about 3-to-1. And no, I'm not saying that backwards. But I don't like my beer to try to taste like pumpkin pie. And it's the same way I feel about a lot of the left-hand beers. Like I've had a key lime beer from them, and it just tastes like you're drinking pie. Okay, maybe that's a technically interesting thing to pull off with a beer, but I don't like it. But anyway, so I started thinking, okay, I don't dislike pumpkin. Pumpkin's a very mellow flavor, subtle flavor on its own. So there's nothing really to not like about pumpkin. I don't like the spice, but what could I do to make a pumpkin beer that didn't use pumpkin pie spice? And so that got me thinking, well, the place you're going to get most of the spice aspect to a beer, if you don't add it directly, is going to be yeast. So what's in pumpkin pie spice? It's cinnamon, allspice, clove, nutmeg, and ginger, I think, if I'm not forgetting something. And so what kind of yeast can give you kind of in that neighborhood of flavors? Saison yeast, of course. So at this point, I'm thinking, I'm a genius. This is going to be the best thing ever. So I started doing a little bit of research. And of course, other people have done this exact thing. This was not a novel thought. And in particular, Trent Musho from the Brew Show did kind of exactly what I was coming up with. So not an original idea. I'm going to give him a ton of credit, because when I saw that he had already been down this road, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to do the recipe he did that he got from Drew Beecham. And that, honestly, that's one of the things I love about the brewing community. Everybody shares. And so I have this kernel of an idea that I think is, genius, but I see other people have beat me to the punch, of course, because other people have a lot more experience with this than I do. But anyway, it was a nice way to validate, okay, someone else has done this too. So it's not a totally off the wall idea. And, with people like Trent Musho and Drew Beecham behind it, how bad can it turn out? We'll find out later. And if it does turn out bad, it's on me. I will preview the tasting and say, I find this a pretty confounding beer to talk about, because I can't figure out if I like it or not, which is I'll leave the tasting for later, but that's a little bit of a preview. Now, in terms of the approach, I do want to talk about this a little bit, and that's why I have some notes here. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So again, we're starting with a Saison, and in particular, Drew Beecham had an article in Zymurgy in 2008 called "A Saison for Every Season," and one of them was this autumn Saison, or Saison automne, if I'm saying it correctly with the French, but and that's the one that Trent Musho used in his video. So again, I'm not pretending to take ownership of any of this. I put my own stamp on it a little bit with the yeast that we'll talk about. But that's the concept, is this Drew Beecham's Autumn Saison recipe with some pumpkin in it, and we'll talk about yeast in a second. So as far as Saison yeast goes, the interesting thing about Saison yeast is it is Saccharomyces cerevisiae variant. But the thing about Saison yeast, true Saison yeast, is that it has, I think it's a gene technically, if you see STA1 positive in some of these yeasts, or the variant Diastaticus, that's a real Saison yeast. And what those can do is they have an enzyme in them, glucoamylase, I think, if I remember correctly. I'll put the right word on the screen if I'm saying it wrong. And what that can do is break down long chain sugars like dextrins and other starches into a form that the yeast can consume. Normal, just run-of-the-mill sac yeast can't do that. The Saison yeast can, And so that's what that's why the characteristic of a Saison is it will get very dry and it attenuates very, highly. I said that backwards, but basically you can get a really dry, highly attenuated beer, and that's very characteristic of a Saison. And it's because of this extra gene that can ferment more of the sugars to the point where you can get down below 1 for your specific gravity even, which I think I did. It depends on if I trust the pill a little bit more than the refractometer. I averaged it out. We'll talk about that later too. So as far as the specific yeast I went with BE 134 Saf Ale. And the reason I chose that one here, I want to pull up my notes because again, I'm going to give credit where credit's due on all this, because this is not, I think, particularly novel, and I am relying on a lot of other people's research on these things to do what I did. So again, that's what I love about the brewing community, and I want to make it clear, like, if it feels like I'm riffing on other people, I absolutely am. So BE 134. Again, Drew Beecham has a lot of research on Saison yeast that he's shared pretty widely, so thanks to Drew for all of that. But what he said about BE 134 specifically is that it's more earthy than hot, which that to me, autumn Saison, pumpkin, earthy, that sounds good. And according to him, it can get a little bit of dry, dusty, earthy cinnamon. So again, we're getting in that realm of the pumpkin pie spice, along with a touch of banana bread and clove and some pear ester. And to me, that sounds like really interesting. You got the pumpkin in there in a little bit, darker Saison with that. That sounds pretty cool. It sounds like it could work pretty well. Let's see, I talked about the yeast. So BE 134, the other reason I wanted to go with that one is because some Saison yeast, like White Labs 565, WLP 565, Belgian Saison 1, that's one a lot of people use. It's kind of the standard if you're going to make Saison. It can stall out, so you got to be careful with that. The BE 134 has incredibly high attenuation potential. They say 89 to 93%. Mine went even crazier than that. Whereas the WLP 565 tends to be more like 65 to 75%. So I wanted to get something that I was sure was going to finish out nice and dry and didn't have maybe that potential of stalling out. And the other reason for that yeast choice, and also why I wanted to make a Saison, is because the other thing that I think I don't like about a lot of pumpkin beers is a lot of them tend to be kind of muddy, if that makes sense. They're kind of the flavor's not super well defined, and that's one of the reasons, in addition to the pumpkin pie spice, that I think I may not like a lot of pumpkin beers. So I wanted to get something with a nice dry finish, a nice, lively mouthfeel. And so I thought this would pretty much do the trick. Now, I talk about this a little bit in the brew day footage as well, and I'll probably talk about it a little bit more in the tasting. But my concept with this, and again, this is borrowed from Trent Mouchot, but goes back to the original idea I had to try to pull this off, is to start the yeast on the lower end of the temperature range. So 64 is what I was shooting for, and let that go about halfway through, and then raise the temperature up to, in my case, 74 at the end to make sure it finishes out. Idea there being the lower temperature range will give you more phenols, which is that clove, banana bread, that kind of area of the flavor wheel, if you want to think of it that way. Whereas the higher temperatures will give you more fruity esters. I wanted more of the phenols, less of the esters for this beer. And I think that's about all I'll say as an intro. So that's my concept. Thanks again to Drew Beecham and Trent Mouchot for taking this little kernel idea that I thought was original, turned out not to be, but it was a good validation that this isn't, like I said, a completely crazy thing to try. So I think with that, we'll go into a little bit of brew day footage, and then we'll have a tasting.
For the grain bill in this pumpkin saison, I went with 87% Thomas Fawcett Maris Otter, 3% Victory Malt, 2.1% Caramel 80, and 2.1% white wheat. And not pictured there in the fermentables is 6% of dark brown sugar. And for the hops, 60-minute boil addition of 2 1/4 ounces of Savinski Golding, and despite the name, that is more related to the Fuggles variety of hops. And then for the last 20 minutes, just a little over half an ounce of sods for 2.7 IBU. And for the yeast, I went with Saf Ale BE 134 Saison yeast. And of course, you can't make a pumpkin saison without pumpkin. So I just used a 29-ounce can of pumpkin. Just make sure it's pure pumpkin, no pumpkin pie filling, etc. I spread that out on a cookie sheet and roasted it in the oven at 350 Fahrenheit for an hour. And then I just added that right to the mash. My idea with adding the pumpkin first, I mean, this is probably obvious, but I figured get it in there first, get it all mixed up. It'll mostly liquefy. The thought of dumping the pumpkin in with the grains and trying to get it all mixed up seemed like a nightmare. And it seemed to work pretty well. It got pretty dissolved before I put the grains in there. Before I mashed in with the grains, I also took the mash paddle to the pumpkin water solution that I had going. And yes, it came out looking like baby food, but I guess that's okay. I mean, I don't know what I expected, but anyway, that's where we wound up before we put the grains in. I felt pretty confident it was well mixed and ready to have the grains go in. In go the grains, and I mashed this at 152 for an hour, and then did a mash out at 170 for about 10 minutes. This is my second time using my steam hat, but before you put it on, you want to get the 60-minute boil hops in there, 2 1/4 ounces of Savinsky Golding. With 20 minutes left in the boil, it's time for the final hop addition, 0.6 ounces of Sots. They go in through the so-called sight glass that you can't actually see through. And we'll see at the end how I fared this time vis-a-vis hop explosion. As the boil finishes up, it's time to weigh out the 13.4 ounces of dark brown sugar that we're going to put in as a late boil addition. And the way I did it this time is when I took the lid, the steam lid off to put the chiller in there and all that, I just attached a short hose, got a fair amount of wort into a pot, and then mixed the sugar in with that, dumped it back in the boil. You can get wort out of the kettle as the boil starts if you want, because by the time, even if it's sitting there for an hour, by the time you get it back in there, it'll have enough time to get re-sanitized as a late boil addition. Here we are chilling down, and as you can see, we had a hop explosion on the second use of the steam condenser lid as well. Getting that dialed in, a little bit of a preview for a future video. I got it to work the third time, so third time's the charm in terms of not having my hops blow up all over the place. And I think it was a combination of being a little more patient at the beginning and reducing the power a little bit more than I think I need to during the boil. That seemed to do the trick, but I'll talk about that in a future video. Here we are going into the fermenter and pitching the BE134 yeast. My concept here is I want to keep the fermentation temperature low to start with to emphasize the phenols and suppress the esters, and then I'll raise it at the end just to make sure that I get a nice clean finish, which I did. We'll just leave it at that and talk about it more in a minute. Since the first time I used my steam condenser lid, the boil-off rate proved to be way less than when I tested with just water, throwing the end volume off. This time around, I reduced the predicted boil-off rate from 1 gallon to half a gallon, and that seemed to really nail that 5.5 gallons volume going into the fermenter. So I think that's a good boil-off rate for me to use moving forward. This is early the morning after brewing. 18 hours later, the yeast is going absolutely crazy. You can see it churning in there. I don't think I've ever done a Saison. Really good activity. I don't know what the percentage is. I didn't look at the brew father yet. When I came out here, it was low pressure last night. When I came out here, it was up to 10. And I kind of want to keep this low. I can let off a little bit more. Definitely under 5, if not even lower. Because, obviously the higher the pressure, the more the character of the yeast is going to be suppressed. And in this case, I definitely want to emphasize the phenols, not the esters, which is why I'm doing it a little bit low temperature for this Saison yeast. But that is some really good activity, not a long time later. Saison yeast do have a tendency to stall out, from what I understand. which is hopefully not going to happen, but we'll see. And then that's also part of the reason why I'm raising temperature towards the end up to 76 to make sure that I get a nice, clean, complete fermentation finish. So, and I do want it to finish kind of dry, so we'll see how that goes. But that is good progress so far. This is about 48 hours into fermentation. It hit a gravity of 1033. So the fermentation profile is ramping the temperature up to 76. Don't want to leave this open too long, but I wanted to give you an update. That's how it looks at this point. Still nice froth on the top there. A little bit of a color change versus a couple days ago or a day or so ago. And at this point, I'm going to let the pressure go up to 10 to 15 maybe, because my theory is at the higher temperatures, the yeast will express more of the fruity esters instead of the phenols. I want to suppress those because I want more phenols, less fruit in this beer. And I don't know how well that's going to pan out, but it's this whole thing's an experiment. So that's where we're at a couple days into fermentation. It's going pretty quickly. That B134 yeast is crazy. I'll talk about the challenges of the temperature control that I have not run into with any other yeast when I do a roundup here, but that's where we are 2 days into the fermentation. This is the morning of day 3 of fermentation, and we are about 87% done already. That B134 is just ripping through this. When the temperature went to 76, I did tighten the spinning valve down, so we've been going at about between 10 and 15 psi, again, to hopefully suppress some of the more fruity aspects of the yeast, to emphasize the phenols for this Pumpkin Saison, and also give it a little bit of natural carbonation. But you can see it's still pretty darn active. I don't really see stuff flying around down the body so much, but there's quite a corrosion on top there. And this is a very active and very fast, apparently, termination. The only thing that can go wrong now basically is if it stalls out, but it's already down to like 10, 11 for the gravity. I think the estimated final gravity from Brewfather was 1003, so we'll see what happens over the next couple of days.
And here we are kegging up our Pumpkin Saison. According to the pill, it hit a final gravity of 0.998. The refractometer reading I took was a little bit higher, so I decided just to call it 1, which is very low. It's supposed to be a little bit higher than that, but that yeast is crazy. The attenuation was at 100%, I think, any way you cut it. So now we get to see how it actually tastes. And here is the Pumpkin Saison in all its glory. I'll talk about that. So we'll just do our usual tasting. Visually, I think it's a great color. It is a little bit, it's not totally clear, and that's fine for a Saison. Hopefully get the little bit of my phone's at a little bit of an angle, but hopefully that'll help a little bit. So it's okay for a Saison to be a little bit hazy. So I did not use any findings when I kegged it. And that's, appropriate to the style. And the other thing I should have said at the outset, I don't know anything about Saisons other than what I researched and figured out while leading up to this brew. I've had Saisons that I liked. I just don't, it's not my area of expertise, if I have any area of expertise at all. So the other thing I'll say, the head, there's a lot of nice tight bubbles on there, and it's a nice white head, which I think is good, or appealing to me anyway. I didn't mention this either. These Saisons, you want to carbonate them higher than you might a lot of other beers. So I don't yet have a manifold on my kegerator to do different, to dial in different pressures to different beers. So what I did for this one is I just took a SodaStream canister with its own regulator and put it just on that keg. And I carbonated about 18 PSI instead of the usual, 12, which from what I understand is about what you want to do. So let's do aroma on this before I get too ahead of myself. Okay, so if you're familiar with Saisons, this definitely has that kind of funky, spicy, a little bit of bubblegummy aroma to it. So that's, appropriate and not unexpected given the yeast that I use. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of condensation on the glass there. So, it smells to me like a Saison. I don't really pick up on any pumpkin. I'll talk about whether I pick up any of the flavor. I have not had a lot of this beer yet. I kind of wanted to wait until I did the video to really talk about it. So I'm not super familiar with it yet. And that's, I think, part of the reason I'm finding it a little bit difficult to talk about too when I have had a couple of sips of it. But okay, here we go. Let's taste this thing and see if this is a pumpkin beer that I actually like. Yeah, it's gotten better since I last tasted it. It is very lively mouthfeel, which is good because that's good for a Saison. I could probably even have carbonated that just a little bit higher. It's not over the top like crazy, but yeah, it's so that's mouthfeel. Flavor wise, it is very dry, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but I think I mentioned this in part of the Brew Day segments. The pill that I had in the fermenter said it got down to, I think, as low as 0.998, and the refractometer I tested it with, and I did the calculation adjustments for when alcohol is present. It had it a little bit higher than that, so I'm calling it 1 because that seemed to average between the two. So anyway, very, very dry, which is, again, good for a Saison. Now the flavor, I'm trying to figure out how to tease this apart. The initial thing that I get, I think I get a little bit of kind of just pumpkin. By the time you have all this going on, you're not going to say, oh, there's pumpkin in there because it's such a subtle flavor. But I do get a certain amount of kind of earthiness, if that makes sense, from the pumpkin, I think. I roasted the pumpkin. I don't really get any roastiness per se in this, but yeah, it's not unpleasant. I should also say this, so given the original gravity, I'll put it up on the screen, but this came in at, I think, almost 9% ABV, which, that's not out of line for this type of beer. I don't know. It's growing on me a little bit. I think the biggest problem, I told you I'm having trouble talking about this beer. I think the biggest problem I have with it is the finish is very tart and a little bit juicy fruit gum-like, which is not what I was going for. So the other thing I will say is I feel like some of my beers, I have a pretty clear vision of what I want it to end up like, and it's easier for me to say, okay, how closely did I hit the mark or not? This one, it was more like, I have an idea, I see other people have done this, I'm going to do that, but I did not know, and especially the biggest variable that I threw at this is I used a different yeast than I've seen other people use for this sort of, for this Pumpkin Saison. So that was, maybe my mistake. Maybe I'd have to try other people's and see if they all kind of come out that way. But I think and then the other thing is, since I don't have a lot of experience with Saisons, me kind of playing God with the yeast fermentation temperatures, I don't know if that was a smart thing to do or not. Probably what I should have done, thinking scientific method here, is just done it how you normally do a Saison, which is ideally you have open fermentation for the first chunk and you let it free rise to whatever it's going to do. And that is another thing, like this yeast wanted to go nuts. I had a little bit of trouble dialing the temperature down that low at the beginning. Partially me because I didn't have my allowed sensor differential on the fermentation chamber high enough to account for the yeast taking off like it did. So I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things that conceptually it seemed like, hey, it seems like it'll get me where I need to go, but not having a baseline of just what's this going to taste like. And then I could have compared another run at it with the temperature phases that I did, which was 64 for the first half of fermentation and then 74 at the end to make sure it finished. I don't think that would have been a problem with this yeast. So I don't know. That's, again, I'm just rambling here, but about kind of my thought process that I feel like I should have had some sort of a baseline so I would know, like, hey, is this different? Did the original recipe that I, let it do what it was going to do work better, worse, or at least give me some sort of guidelines to what I think about this? So But again, there's a nice fruity funkiness to the aroma for sure. That definitely, you know, if you've had any saisons, you would smell this beer, and there's no questioning, you know, what kind of beer it is for sure. Oh, and I should say glass. I picked this glass because it doesn't have a logo on it. Normally for saisons, you'd use a tulip glass or even a teku glass, but you know, this way you can see what's going on with the beer a little bit better. Maybe I'll get a shot over here. Again, nice bubbles. I like the carbonation. That's all good. Like I said, it could even be more carbonated. I'm not sure that mini regulators is telling me the absolute truth, because this does not seem crazy high carbonation. And I think I like, as it's warming up just a little bit, I like it a little bit better. It's stuff, the flavors are coming together a little bit more. But again, I think probably the reason that I am not over the moon happy with it is because in the finish, it has this juicy fruit tart thing going on. And that may just be nature of the beast with what I did here. And because I know, like in his video, Trent, one of the best autumn beers he makes, I think, is how he put it. This is not my favorite, but I also am not a huge Saison guy to begin with. I definitely like a few Belgian beers and Saisons in particular, but it's not kind of my go-to style that I think about a lot. So that could be part of it too, just being honest here. But yeah, I mean, as I have more of it, I'm not mad at it. But it is, I think I needed more information to know what I was shooting for and to know if this achieved kind of what I wanted to achieve with this. I had a little bit unclear vision, and that's something that I think is a good tip in general. Like, know what you're trying to make in so far as you can, or accept, and maybe I'm getting too hung up on that. Accept, hey, I'm going to do this as an experiment, and this is what you wind up with, and then you learn some stuff. I learn, you know, what B134 yeast does. I did a lot of reading on Saison, so I know a lot more than I did before, even though I don't know much. And it was a fun beer to make. It's fun to roast some pumpkin, throw it in mash. That was a good time. I think if I were to make an ideal pumpkin beer, and maybe I'll try, maybe this will be an annual thing. I'll try pumpkin beers that I would like. This would not be the one. I don't think. I'm going to send this around to some people and just see what they think. I'll be honest and say I'm not totally happy with it, but I don't know if it's just I don't like it, or if hey, that's, such and such is out of whack, or that temperature control you were doing was a bad idea and it made it, come out the way it did. Or somebody else might taste it and say they love it if they're into Saisons, and I don't know. Anyway, I will stop there because if I keep talking, I'm just going to ramble. But I don't know. Let's just do a little roundup here. So I'm happy with the color. That's kind of a neat color. Nice orange. You look at that and maybe think, especially this time of year, yeah, a little bit pumpkin-like. Carbonation could be higher even, but it's pretty good. The head's sticking around. That's good. It's got a nice white head on it. Yeah, the bubbles, there's some bubbles. I don't know how well they'll come up on the camera there because it's a little bit of a cloudy beer, but there's some bubbles coming up there. So that's good. Aroma. I like the aroma better than I like the flavor, honestly. The aroma is kind of earthy, spicy, so that worked. Just a little bit fruity, especially now that it warms up a little bit. There's a little bit of fruit going on there, and I don't hate that. I think Drew Beecham's mention of pear definitely comes out in the aroma. And I think, the flavor, it's good, and for me, it's good until the end, and then it just gets this a little bit too harsh, bubblegummy thing, and that's the beer. So, and I've been I made this beer quite a long time ago. I've been putting it off doing this video because I am really having trouble talking about the beer, but that's the best I can do. And I needed to get it done and out the door, and we will move on to other things. I'm not going to dump it out. I'll finish this glass and see how I think about it as I go through the rest of it. But it was a fun experiment, if you're into Saisons, I would totally try this. And definitely if you know more about Saisons than I do, absolutely try this. Or even just, if you are listening to me talk about Saisons and go, oh God, this guy is so wrong about X, Y, or Z, I would love to know that. Because again, the community is great. I love learning from other people's experiences and knowledge that I don't have, because Saisons is kind of a world that to me is other than me having one every once in a while that I like, is pretty opaque at this point. So anyway, we'll stop there. Cheers. I'm going to go finish my, pumpkin beer that I don't hate, but not sure I like. I guess that's the best way to put it. So we'll see in the next one. I think the next one coming up is going to be the final beer and a roundup of the BrewTubers Amber Ale Malt Experiment. So that'll be fun. And then before long, I will have my Enigma Smash beer video come out. And that's the small batch smash beer that I made on Learn to Brew Day. So you can be looking forward to those. Tell me what I don't know about Saisons, because there's a lot. Anyway, cheers. See you in the next one.